Hey everyone, this is Six Path Weeb, and welcome back to the channel where the world of Shinobi gets reimagined. Today, we're jumping into part 2 of our fanfic series, What if Naruko changed the Shinobi way? A bold twist on the ninja world, where Naruko steps up to challenge tradition and reshape the future. Before we begin, a quick disclaimer. The content on this channel is for entertainment and discussion purposes only. I do not own any of the anime footage used in my videos. All rights and credits go to their respective creators and copyright holders. Let's get started. A few days had passed, and time seemed to flow more quickly, as though it were hurrying towards something unknown. Naruko had been caught in a cycle of reflection, her thoughts swirling in constant motion. Several nights had gone without rest, her mind unwilling to settle after everything she had recently discovered. But as with all things, the sleepless nights eventually faded. Naruko began to sleep peacefully again. Her thoughts, once troubled, slowly made room for acceptance. The truth she had learned, though difficult, found its place within her. Even though the facts were painful and frustrating, she acknowledged them. Holding resentment had never come easily to her. Still, acceptance did not mean approval, and she certainly wasn't content with the choices others had made that affected her so deeply. Even so, for her own peace of mind, she knew she could not stay anchored to the past. The decisions had been made long ago, and they had shaped her life thus far. She would continue to live with them, no matter how complex or heavy they were. She had endured too much in her young life to allow something like hidden truths to hold her back. Her father was no longer around, and neither was the third Hokage. To dwell on past mistakes and assign blame to those who were no longer present was a burden she chose not to carry. Naruko understood that clinging to bitterness would do her no good. There was no changing the past, only learning how to carry its weight with grace. Uzumaki Naruko, born Namikaze Naruko, gazed at a photograph of a woman with long, red hair and kind blue eyes. The resemblance between them was clear. Though the image rested gently in her hand, it was already etched into her memory. She admired this woman deeply, even if she would never hear her voice in this lifetime. This was her mother, Kushina Uzumaki, a courageous woman who had once held the 9 tails within her just as Naruko now did. Naruko let out a soft sigh and placed the photograph beside her. Though it belonged to the past, it held a special place in her heart. Nothing could be more precious than the memory of her mother. As for her father, the 4th Hokage, Naruko didn't need a picture to see him. One look in the mirror revealed a reflection so similar, it was as though a younger version of him stared back at her. Jiraiya often commented on how much she reminded him of his former student. And truly, the resemblance was uncanny. She had already sorted through the items Itachi had brought her, pictures of her parents, notes on sealing techniques, the formula for the Flying Thunder God technique, and her father's thoughts on how to complete the Rasengan. Another sigh escaped her lips as she rose from her bed and headed toward the kitchen. It was just past noon, and by now, Itachi was surely having his tea. Without fail, he observed this daily ritual. When she entered the kitchen, she wasn't surprised to see him there, calmly sipping from a warm cup. Itachi shifted his gaze from his mug to Naruko. He had given her the time and space to process everything on her own. He believed it was important for her to arrive at her own conclusions, rather than be influenced by what others thought she should feel or believe. Naruko took a seat across the table. She never particularly enjoyed tea, but she still joined him out of courtesy. The silence between them stretched comfortably. Naruko's thoughts wandered across the elemental nations, while Itachi quietly enjoyed his tea. "Have you had time to think everything through?" Itachi asked, setting his empty mug down. Naruko nodded slightly. "Yes, I have," she said, her voice calm and even. "And?" Itachi prompted, his expression unreadable. "I'm not pleased that the 3rd Hokage kept things from me. Jiraiya, too. Even Lady Tsunade knew and chose not to say anything. Still, I can't really hold it against Tsunade, she only recently returned to the village," Naruko responded with a composed tone. Her feelings toward Tsunade had changed, she no longer felt comfortable using the familiar nickname she once had. "And your father?" Itachi asked. His interest clearly lay in her thoughts about the 4th Hokage. Naruko paused, a contemplative expression crossing her face. It was brief, and then her face returned to its neutral state. "I'm not happy with what he did. Not only did he give his life, but he left a difficult path for me to walk. Still, he was my father, and I was his daughter. That fact doesn't change. He made his choice as Hokage, and I understand that. It's a little disheartening that he prioritized the village over me, though." Itachi observed her quietly. He couldn't discern whether she was upset or merely reflective. Her tone remained steady, offering no hint of strong emotion. Do you resent him for it? He asked. Naruko shook her head slowly. I don't like that he sealed the 9 tails inside me. It created the life I've had to live in the village. But even so, I don't have it in me to hold resentment, especially not for my father. I understand his responsibilities as Hokage. I don't harbor anger toward him. I've accepted it. Your father wanted you to be seen as a hero, Itachi said quietly. That's why the 3rd Hokage shared your status publicly. He believed the village would honor his child for holding the 9 tails at bay. That went well, Naruko replied with dry sarcasm. The village definitely treated me like a hero. Despite the irony in her words, her expression remained unchanged. Your father had noble intentions, Itachi continued. He wanted to create peace. Sadly, he passed before he could see that vision fulfilled. Naruko raised an eyebrow. Peace? Itachi nodded. You haven't yet seen the full extent of the shinobi world, but you've already witnessed troubling things. The world can be harsh, and true peace is rare. While Konoha enjoys relative harmony, many other places still struggle. Your father dreamed of a world united, one where trust and cooperation replaced rivalry and suspicion. Naruko's thoughtful look returned. She hadn't considered the world in that light before. Her father's dream was one worth aspiring to. Peace. She echoed. I used to want to become Hokage just to prove myself, to be acknowledged. I never thought beyond that. The first Hokage tried to bring peace, but his dream was never fully realized. The 3rd tried as well, but ultimately fell short, Itachi explained. Today, few even attempt to seek lasting peace. They view it as something unreachable. If the villages can't trust one another, they'll never find peace, Naruko said. Sunagakure betrayed us once, even as allies. Without trust, there's no foundation. Trust takes years to build and moments to break, Itachi agreed. Another quiet moment passed between them. Naruko's thoughts drifted to the role of shinobi. The lifestyle, the expectations, it often seemed focused on conflict. She had seen others act without hesitation in battle, but she didn't understand why such behavior was necessary. Why couldn't strength be used to protect, rather than harm? What do you think about taking lives? She asked, choosing her words carefully. Itachi regarded her for a moment. In some situations, extreme actions are used to prevent harm to many. But taking a life should never be treated casually. A true shinobi acts to protect others, not to cause harm. I still think it's wrong, Naruko said quietly. You've never had to do it, have you? Itachi asked. Naruko shook her head. That day may come. But what defines us isn't just what we do, it's how we feel about it. If we never lose our humanity, even in difficult choices, we remain true to ourselves. Naruko didn't respond. She didn't want to think about it any further. Itachi noticed her hesitation and changed the subject. Did you find the scrolls helpful? Naruko brightened slightly. Yes. The sealing technique scrolls are especially helpful, they'll improve my understanding. But what really stood out were my father's notes on the Rasengan and the Flying Thunder God technique. I've already had my clones start working on them. Itachi nodded. He could tell she was eager to explore her father's legacy. How does one complete the Rasengan? I thought it was already finished, he asked. It's pure chakra, Naruko explained. To complete it, you have to add your chakra element. In my case, wind. My father was never able to finish that part, but his notes are detailed. Itachi was impressed. The Rasengan was already a high-level technique. With elemental enhancement, it could become a truly exceptional jutsu. When will we resume training? Naruko asked. Itachi stood up. Right now, he said simply. Naruko followed without hesitation. A month had passed since they last trained together, and she was eager to resume. Their session was intense, leaving her physically drained. But she made no complaints. She understood that growth came through effort, and with effort came reward. Konoha. It had been 2 years since Naruko had left the village. 2 long years since Jiraiya had set out to find her after she departed on her own terms. Despite his persistent search across the elemental nations, no sign or clue had revealed her whereabouts. It was as though she had simply vanished. Jiraiya was convinced that Naruko had not left the Fire Country. As skilled as she might be at avoiding detection, he believed he would have discovered something if she had crossed its borders. Still, the Fire Country was vast, and locating one determined young kunoichi was no easy task. With a heavy sigh, Jiraiya stood atop the Hokage monument, gazing thoughtfully at the tower in the distance. He had finally returned to the village, fully prepared to face Tsunade, knowing she would not be pleased with the silence he had maintained. Throughout his search, he He had not once responded to her messages, not because he had nothing to say, but because he couldn't bring himself to explain the situation without answers. Raising a bottle of sake to his lips, he took a final sip before emptying it, steeling himself for what was to come. With a wiped mouth and a determined look, he headed toward the Hokage's office. Hokage's office. Tsunade sat at her desk, buried under a pile of paperwork. As much as she disliked the administrative side of her job, she had grown used to it. It was a daily routine, and even though the endless forms gave her headaches, she tackled them with the responsibility her position demanded. Since Naruko had left the village, Tsunade had made significant changes in her habits. She had given up sake, finding herself more productive without it. Still, in quieter moments, she missed it, just as she missed the blonde girl who used to storm into her office, affectionately calling her granny and demanding missions. She smiled faintly at the memory. Naruko had always brought a certain energy to the Hokage's office, even if it meant Shizune and Sakura had to chase her down for routine checkups. Naruko had never liked hospitals, and her playful evasions were now endearing memories. 2 years had passed without that bright, mischievous grin lighting up her office. Tsunade could only hope that wherever Naruko was, she had grown, emotionally and in strength. She wanted Naruko to return stronger, perhaps even at a jounin level, to protect herself and carry out missions with confidence. Still, even with strength came concern, for higher-ranked missions often came with greater challenges, ones Tsunade wished Naruko would never have to face. Oddly, Jiraiya had provided no updates. Normally, he would have sent progress reports regularly, but this time there had been complete silence. It didn't sit well with Tsunade. She found it uncharacteristic and troubling. Suddenly, the window to her office swung open as Jiraiya entered with his usual flair, remaining safely by the window. "I'm back," he declared cheerfully, trying to ease the tension he knew was imminent. "It's about time, you incorrigible wanderer," Tsunade snapped, ignoring his dramatic entrance. More pressing matters required attention. "Why didn't you contact me? Why haven't you responded to any of my messages?" she asked sternly. Jiraiya chuckled nervously. Well, you see, I've been a little too busy. Besides, showing up in person is better than sending a letter, right? You get to see my charming face." Tsunade's expression remained unchanged, though a slight twitch showed her irritation. "So, how is she?" Jiraiya rubbed the back of his neck. There was no way to sugarcoat the truth, so he decided to be direct. "Well, a few days after we left the village. Naruko left. She ran off while I was out meeting a contact." It took a moment for Tsunade to fully register what he had said. When it did, her eyes widened in disbelief. "What?" Her voice echoed through the tower, a thunderous exclamation that left the building shaking slightly. Those nearby instinctively stepped away from the Hokage's tower. Whenever the fifth Hokage raised her voice like that, it was a sign of serious frustration. "It's not my fault," Jiraiya defended quickly. "I had secured a room for us at a small inn, and when I returned, she was gone." "Jiraiya," Tsunade said slowly, rising from her seat, her presence suddenly intense. "How could you let that happen?" Jiraiya held his hands up, trying to stay calm. "Please, Tsunade. I'm just as concerned. I never expected this either." She walked toward him with purpose, her gaze sharp and unwavering. When she reached him, she grabbed him by the collar, her eyes full of restrained anger, not out of hate, but out of deep worry for Naruko. "Jiraiya," she repeated in a quiet voice, "you'd better help me find her." The scene shifted not into violence but a long, drawn-out scolding full of concern. Jiraiya endured Tsunade's pointed reprimands, understanding her frustration came from care, for Naruko, for the village, and even for him. Konoha's people might have heard her raised voice, but what lingered after was a heavy silence filled with hope and determination. They would find Naruko. And when they did, they'd welcome her home. 3 hours later. After a medical procedure, Jiraiya was fully bandaged from head to toe, resembling more of a rap doll than a person. Despite being injured more than once due to Tsunade's overwhelming strength, he had always shown a remarkable ability to bounce back quickly. Even Tsunade, as skilled as she was, couldn't quite explain how he managed such swift recoveries. Nevertheless, he'd be back on his feet soon, already eager to resume his research. "Explain everything to me, Jiraiya," Tsunade demanded, her gaze firm as she faced the Sannin. "I already told you," Jiraiya replied with a tired sigh, still sore from his latest ordeal. "We reserved a room in a small town about 3 days' walk from Konoha. I asked Naruko to wait at the hotel while I met a contact for some important information. But when I returned, she was gone, along with her travel documents. Tsunade sighed. Given the circumstances under which Naruko had left the village, it wasn't difficult to believe she had chosen to leave quietly. From what she'd heard, Naruko had always been clever enough to disappear without leaving a trace. Still, that didn't mean Jiraiya was off the hook. It had been his responsibility to prevent something like that from happening. What exactly have you been doing for the past 2 years? Tsunade asked, narrowing her eyes. I've searched for her all across the elemental nations, Jiraiya said, staring up at the ceiling. And? Tsunade prompted. I couldn't find her. Not even a single clue. He was visibly frustrated. The fact that a 13-year-old had managed to vanish without a trace was not easy for him to accept. So that's why you're only telling me now, Tsunade concluded. If you had found her, you wouldn't have told me she had disappeared in the first place, would you? Jiraiya gave a sheepish smile. Tsunade knew him well, he would have avoided telling her, knowing her reaction would be explosive. Tsunade sat down beside his bed, exhaling slowly. So, you don't know where she is, what she's doing, or even if she's okay? Jiraiya nodded. The toads do know where she is, he admitted. What? Tsunade's eyes widened. Then why didn't they tell you? Because Naruko asked them not to, Jiraiya answered with some frustration. As a loyal summoner, he had expected their support, but they had honored Naruko's request instead. That girl, Tsunade murmured. The fact that Naruko asked to keep her location secret clearly meant she didn't want to be found. Gamabunta did mention she's fine, Jiraiya added. From what he said, she's probably training somewhere, but even that is hard to believe. Tsunade nodded thoughtfully. It was unlikely she had someone to train her outside the village. The most reasonable conclusion was that she was training alone, possibly with help from the toads. What now? She asked, resigned. I'll keep looking for her. Once I'm cleared to leave, Jiraiya replied. How's Sasuke doing? So far, so good. Danzo has helped him shape up a bit, Tsunade answered, not sounding particularly enthusiastic. He's already a Jonin. I've asked Kakashi to continue his training. I thought Kakashi might have a better influence on him. Jiraiya nodded. I didn't expect him to progress so quickly. I suppose Danzo's training really is effective. Maybe, but it comes at a cost. His methods often produce emotionally distant soldiers. That's why Kakashi is stepping in now, Tsunade explained. I'm planning to have Sasuke serve temporarily with the Anbu. Other than that, he'll function like any regular Jonin. She stood up. I'm heading back to the office. Don't leave this room until I say so. Understood? Yes, ma'am, Jiraiya replied. As soon as Tsunade left the room, Jiraiya made a surprisingly fast recovery. With a few minor grunts, he removed his bandages and quietly exited through the window. There was research to be done. 2 years and 10 months after Naruko left Konoha. Naruko swiftly leapt back, avoiding a powerful strike from Itachi that hit the ground with intense force. She immediately darted forward while his arm was still extended. Her foot flew upward, aiming to connect with his face. Itachi sensed the attack and managed to block it with both arms, though the force of the impact pushed him back. Naruko didn't let up. She spun mid-air and unleashed a fast roundhouse kick. Itachi, unable to fully recover from her earlier strike, blocked with one arm but was sent flying back from the force. Without wasting a second, Naruko appeared above him. She channeled wind chakra into her fist and brought it down with precision. Her punch connected with his chest and sent him crashing down to the ground like a meteor. But something felt off. A genjutsu? Naruko wondered. She quickly formed a hand seal. Release, she whispered and broke free from the illusion. She sensed movement behind her. Spinning around, she saw Itachi racing toward her with impressive speed. She couldn't avoid the knee strike that met her midsection. Following up, Itachi delivered a strong punch to her face, sending her flying. Naruko recovered quickly in mid-air, flipping and landing softly in a crouch. She stood and calmly faced her opponent. You caught me in a genjutsu the moment I came above you, she observed. Itachi nodded. You're improving at recognizing illusions, he said. When they first began training, Naruko had little understanding of genjutsu. Now she could sense and break out of them much faster. Naruko didn't respond. She shifted back into her taijutsu stance, focused and ready. The two clashed again. Itachi launched a high roundhouse kick, but Naruko ducked, dodging under it. She attempted a leg sweep, but Itachi effortlessly leapt over it. While airborne, he performed a series of hand seals. Fire style, great fireball technique. A large fireball burst from his mouth and sped toward Naruko. The flames appeared to engulf her, but Itachi stayed cautious. A straightforward attack like that wouldn't defeat her. He was right. Naruko emerged behind him, launching a surprise kick. But she vanished into smoke upon contact, a shadow clone. Another Naruko appeared behind him and threw several shuriken. Realizing the distraction, Itachi used a swift substitution technique. A wooden log took his place, absorbing the attack. Naruko's eyes narrowed, scanning for his location. Suddenly, a barrage of shuriken flew toward her. With quick reflexes, she summoned the wind around her and fused it with chakra. Wind release, wind palm. A powerful gust of wind met the incoming projectiles, diverting them away. The air current continued toward Itachi, who leapt aside to avoid it. Without delay, Naruko moved through a series of hand seals. The wind stirred, forming several spinning wind-infused shuriken around her. Wind release, wind shuriken. The energy-filled shuriken launched forward, spiraling through the air with precision and speed, aimed directly at her opponent. The wind shuriken soared toward Itachi, who remained still, fully aware of their sharp edges and potential to leave marks. He recognized the technique and knew it could be troublesome if it landed. Just as the projectiles neared him, his form dissolved into a flurry of crows. Naruko cancelled her technique and focused on the spot where he had disappeared. Fire release, Phoenix Flower. Itachi called out, launching several fireballs in Naruko's direction. She remained composed, evaluating the situation. She knew from experience that this particular technique often served as a distraction, usually concealing a follow-up attack. However, she couldn't quite pinpoint what Itachi's intention might be this time. Shaking off her uncertainty, Naruko quickly formed several hand signs and brought her hands together. Sealing art, chakra barrier, she whispered. A bright orange barrier flared to life around her, glowing with her chakra. It wasn't wide, just large enough to protect her from the oncoming attack. The fireballs struck the barrier, but they failed to penetrate it. Itachi calmly moved through another set of hand signs. Fire style, dragon breath, he declared, unleashing a powerful stream of intense flames. The fiery wave surged toward Naruko at high speed. Inside her barrier, Naruko remained still, focusing all her energy on maintaining it. The flames enveloped her defense, but she stayed firm. The strength of the barrier depended entirely on the amount of chakra she channeled into it. Although the shield was highly effective against chakra-based techniques, strong physical force could still break through it. It also had the drawback of being energy-intensive and prevented her from launching counterattacks while it was active. Once the flames subsided, Naruko deactivated her barrier and dashed toward Itachi. They met in a fast-paced taijutsu exchange, their strikes generating bursts of energy across the small training ground. Naruko was quicker, but Itachi's Sharingan allowed him to anticipate her movements. Their duel was balanced, with punches and kicks being blocked or dodged in quick succession. Suddenly, Itachi vanished from sight and reappeared behind Naruko, placing a kunai near her neck. But to his surprise, her form dissipated in a gust of wind. The real Naruko had used a clever clone technique. The resulting burst of wind disrupted Itachi, causing minor scrapes and pushing him back. He recovered swiftly, flipping through the air and landing gracefully. The moment he touched down, he felt a surge of chakra. Naruko appeared in front of him, a glowing Rasengan forming in her palm. Rasengan, she shouted, thrusting it toward him. Thanks to his experience, Itachi managed to leap to the side just in time. The Rasengan struck the ground, causing a powerful explosion and forming a large crater in the training area. As the dust settled, Naruko stood at the center of the crater, breathing steadily. Not far from her, Itachi's outfit was slightly tattered from the earlier burst, but he remained composed despite a bit of exhaustion. "That's enough for today," Itachi said, signaling the end of their sparring match. Naruko had a tendency to overdo it with her powerful techniques, and Itachi preferred not to have to repair the entire training ground again, especially since it was protected by a chakra-concealing barrier. Naruko nodded and brushed herself off before sitting under a nearby tree in a meditative pose. It was important to calm her body and recover her energy after such intense training. As Naruko settled into her meditation, Itachi made his way back to the house. The next day, Naruko lay peacefully under the same tree, eyes closed, enjoying the refreshing breeze. It was rare for her to take a break from training, but she had earned the rest and felt proud of her progress. Even in relaxation, her dedication to growth never wavered. Itachi approached and sat beside her with a serious expression. Naruko sensed his presence but didn't open her eyes immediately. "I want to talk to you about two important things, Naruko," he said, his tone calm and direct. Her eyes opened at the sound of his voice, but she remained relaxed, signaling him to continue. The first thing concerns the Akatsuki and why I left, he began without hesitation. Naruko's eyes narrowed slightly. Itachi rarely spoke of the Akatsuki, and she had never pushed for answers. She had always sensed there was more to the story than what met the eye. The Akatsuki no longer exists, Itachi said plainly. He didn't need to elaborate with unnecessary details, he preferred to speak with clarity and purpose. Though surprised, Naruko didn't show it. She only raised an eyebrow, letting him know she was listening. Why? She asked simply. There was a disagreement between Pain, the face of the organization, and the true leader behind the scenes. Pain didn't agree with the direction the real leader was taking and felt the decisions being made were dangerous. This eventually led to a major confrontation. Naruko remained quiet, absorbing the information. She had never suspected the organization had two leaders. It made sense now, such strong personalities were bound to clash. The battle took place in Ame, where Akatsuki was headquartered. The outcome resulted in major destruction to the area. Pain emerged victorious, but the toll it took on him was immense. Before he passed on, he used his remaining strength to restore peace to the village, reviving those affected by the conflict, Itachi explained. He hadn't witnessed the battle himself but had seen the results. The scale of the damage was unlike anything he'd seen before. The villagers had revered Pain, and now Itachi understood why. With the leadership gone, the organization fell apart, Naruko concluded. Yes. Some of the former members chose to continue their paths alone, while others stayed together in small groups, he added, his demeanor unchanged. Naruko nodded. And you chose a different path. You walked away. I did. I told you before, my interest was in you. That choice brought me here. As the sun filtered through the leaves above them, Naruko closed her eyes again, reflecting on Itachi's words. The journey ahead still held challenges, but for now, she found comfort in the quiet and the bond they shared. Right now, there are about 5 or 6 former members of the Akatsuki roaming freely within the elemental nations, Naruko stated. Without the structure of the Akatsuki, it was only a matter of time before these individuals began acting independently, possibly causing disturbances throughout the villages. The Akatsuki had operated with precision and secrecy, avoiding unnecessary attention. Now, without that discipline, things could easily spiral, unless those members chose a more thoughtful path. Yes. Without the Akatsuki's influence, the Jinchuriki are no longer being targeted. Naruko nodded. That was a comforting thought. She no longer had to worry about the organization pursuing her for the power of the 9 tails. This meant all Jinchuriki were finally safe from that threat. That's definitely some good news, she said. What happened to Amigakure? The symbolic leader of the Akatsuki, Pain, once led the village after overcoming Hanzo. He had a close partner, Konan, who had known him since childhood. From what I understand, she's now the leader of Amigakure, came the reply. Naruko nodded thoughtfully. What was the real goal of the Akatsuki? She asked, wondering what purpose they had in collecting the power of the 9-tailed beasts. It was difficult to believe anything positive could come from concentrating that much power in the hands of rogue individuals. Itachi shook his head gently. Even I don't know the full reason they were gathering the tailed beasts. What I do know is that Pain, along with Konan, believed that combining all the Baiju's power could somehow bring about peace. What kind of peace, though, remains unclear to me. As for Madara, his intentions were always kept secret, and I was never able to fully uncover what he was planning. I wonder what kind of peace someone could hope to create with that much power, Naruko said quietly, more to herself than to Itachi. It likely wouldn't have turned out well, Itachi responded. After a brief pause, he continued in a more serious tone. There's something important I need to tell you, a secret I was never supposed to share with anyone. But I believe you deserve to know the truth. It concerns some difficult truths about Konoha. Naruko straightened and leaned against the nearby tree, her eyes fixed on Itachi. She trusted him, but she hadn't expected him to risk so much by revealing confidential information. The weight in his voice made her all the more curious. Only 3 people in Konoha know of this, Shimura Dansu, Mito Kato Homura, and Yuditane Koharu, members of the council. The 3rd Hokage also knew, but he has since passed away, Itachi said calmly. There are no written records of it anywhere. Naruko's curiosity deepened. Her expression made it clear. This involved key figures within Konoha, and Itachi's involvement added to her intrigue. So not even the Anbu commander, Jiraiya, or the current Hokage know about it? Naruko asked. Itachi nodded. What I'm about to share is the truth behind the Uchiha incident. Naruko leaned in, her full attention on him. I didn't act against my clan out of ambition or desire for strength. I was given an order, Itachi said softly. Naruko's eyes widened for a brief moment before returning to normal. That reaction was subtle, but it spoke volumes. Why? She asked the question that anyone would naturally ask upon hearing such a revelation. My clan was preparing to take control of the village. The third Hokage attempted peaceful negotiations, but no agreement was reached. To prevent a conflict that could tear the village apart, I was instructed to intervene. Itachi's voice remained composed. Naruko looked at him with surprise. It was difficult to imagine that Konoha would ask one of its own to carry out such a task. She couldn't believe such a decision had been made, even with failed negotiations. Why did your clan want to take control of the village? They felt sidelined. The Uchiha had been distanced from the core of Konoha's decision-making and stripped of real influence. Despite helping to found the village, they were relegated to minor roles. It created a deep sense of resentment. Naruko could understand how that must have felt. The Uchiha and Senju clans had built Konoha together. Uchiha Madara and Senju Hashirama had worked side by side to create it. But by the time of the incident, the Uchiha had been reduced to overseeing local security, without a voice in governance. It was understandable they would feel undervalued, but still, rebellion wasn't the answer. After the Nine Tails incident, suspicion began to fall on the Uchiha, Itachi added. People thought someone with the Sharingan might have influenced the creature. That suspicion only worsened the division. People started avoiding them. Naruko remembered Itachi mentioning before that a Sharingan user had once been suspected of influencing the Nine Tails. With the Sharingan being unique to the Uchiha, the clan naturally came under scrutiny. And since no one from the Uchiha had turned away from the village, all the blame landed on the clan as a whole, Naruko concluded. She paused, then a small smile formed on her face, making Itachi raise an eyebrow. Clearly, something had amused her, but what, he couldn't quite tell. The villagers believed that the nine-tailed fox had been manipulated by an unknown force. Still, they held on to their resentment, blaming the creature for the chaos, while simultaneously directing suspicion toward the Uchiha clan. If they genuinely thought it was under someone else's control, why did they continue to treat it as if it had acted of its own free will? Naruko voiced this paradox calmly. They contradict themselves. If the Nine Tails was only being used, it shouldn't be held responsible for something beyond its control. Logic would suggest that the real fault lies with the person who summoned it, not the one manipulated. Itachi nodded thoughtfully. Very few saw things the way Naruko did. Even though the people of Konoha believed the Nine Tails was summoned against its will, they still viewed it with fear and disdain. They couldn't separate its actions from its identity. To them, it remained a terrifying force, not because it chose destruction, but because it wasn't human and had caused great harm, regardless of intent. You seem to be handling all of this better than I expected, Itachi observed. Naruko offered a slight shrug. I started piecing things together as I got to know you. It must have been incredibly difficult to do what you did involving your family. It was, Itachi replied simply, his face unreadable. Why did you let Sasuke go? I couldn't bring myself to harm her, he responded quietly. Naruko closed her eyes, already suspecting the answer. It was clear to her now. It wasn't regret that Itachi carried, but a deep, complicated loyalty to both his village and his sister. He had chosen to protect one by sacrificing the other. You're keeping the truth from Sasuke to protect her. You want her to defeat you someday, not out of hate, but as a way to honor her clan and bring closure to what happened. Naruko stood slowly, eyes still closed. I won't tell her. Thank you for trusting me. She turned and walked away, her thoughts already drifting to the sealing techniques she needed to finish. Itachi watched her go with a faint, rare smile. Meeting Naruko had been a quiet comfort. She possessed a kindness and clarity he had rarely seen. She reminded him of her father in some ways, brilliant with sealing arts, compassionate, but there was something distinct about her, something that set her apart even from those she resembled. The third Hokage had been a wise and gentle leader in his later years, but even he was not like Naruko. In all his life, Itachi had never met anyone quite like her. He considered himself fortunate to have recognized her potential and helped guide it. He felt Jiraiya had missed a valuable opportunity by not taking her training more seriously. Though Itachi respected the man, he believed Jiraiya had overlooked just how much Naruko could achieve. Still, Itachi would not take credit for her growth. Naruko's strength came from her own resolve. He had merely helped point her in the right direction. A few days later, Mount Myaboku. Naruko found herself suddenly transported to another realm. It was early in the morning, and she quickly realized she had been brought to Fukasaku's residence. She had been here before when she sought training in Shinjutsu. Looking around, she spotted Fukasaku and Shima watching her with calm expressions. "I was beginning to think you'd stopped calling me Fukasaku-sama," she said with a slight smile, addressing the elder toad. Fukasaku smiled back. "We've given it a lot of thought," he said warmly. "Ma and I have decided, I'm going to train you in Shinjutsu. Ma won't be involved in the process this time." Naruko offered a small, polite smile. "That's reassuring to hear." "I'll go prepare something for Naruko-chan to eat before she starts her training," Shima said cheerfully. Fukasaku simply nodded, his focus on Naruko. She was the priority right now. "Come with me, Naruko-chan." Naruko crouched out of the modest house and followed him to a wide clearing filled with large stone statues of toads. She breathed in deeply, appreciating the fresh, natural air. It felt peaceful, different from the atmosphere back at her training hideout. Fukasaku gestured for her to sit while he stood nearby, his expression serious. "Before we begin, you need to understand the risks of learning Shinjutsu," he said, drawing her attention. "This training involves absorbing chakra from nature and blending it with your own spiritual and physical energy. Nature energy is incredibly powerful. If you absorb too much or fail to control it properly, the consequences can be serious." He pointed to the statues nearby. "These are reminders of those who couldn't maintain the balance." Naruko certainly hadn't expected the challenges that came with learning Shinjutsu. Itachi had once explained that Shinjutsu was a powerful art, and now Naruko fully understood that great power always came with significant effort and risk. Still, she was determined. She knew that achieving something truly meaningful required commitment and perseverance. "Do you still want to train, even knowing the risks involved?" Fukasaku asked gently. "Yes," Naruko replied with a small, confident smile, thinking back to her younger self. "I've never been one to back down from a challenge." Fukasaku gave a knowing smile. "I thought you might say that," he said, then directed Naruko to sit beside a special waterfall. At first glance, it looked like water was flowing, but it was actually a unique oil. To absorb natural energy, you must become one with nature, feel it, hear it, understand it, he explained as Naruko settled into a meditative pose. "This should come naturally to you, especially since you're already familiar with meditation." "Is it possible to train in Shinjutsu somewhere else in the elemental nations?" Naruko asked. Fukasaku nodded. "Technically, yes. But because of the unique properties and the potential risks involved, it's safest to train here. This oil helps with absorbing natural chakra and is only found in this location." As he spoke, he gently poured some of the oil over her. "When you absorb too much chakra, I'll need to use this," he said, holding up a special black staff. "It helps purify excess natural energy safely." With that, Naruko began her Shinjutsu training under the guidance of the Toad Sage. Fukasaku wanted her to start immediately, hoping she could master the technique before returning to Konoha. Jiraiya, despite years of effort, had never fully perfected the technique. Unlike Jiraiya, however, Naruko had considerably more chakra reserves, an essential requirement for mastering Shinjutsu. Later that day, it was already noon, and Itachi hadn't seen Naruko. It was unlike her to disappear without notice. If she went somewhere, it was usually to meditate by the Valley of the End. She never left without telling someone. Though Itachi wasn't overly concerned, he trusted in Naruko's abilities. He decided to wait and see what unfolded. Suddenly, a puff of smoke appeared nearby, and a large toad materialized. It was Gamakichi. Naruko often summoned him to report on her training progress. Gamakichi hopped over to Itachi. "I was sent to inform you that Naruko has been reverse summoned to Mount Mayuboku. She'll be there for some time. The elders have agreed to teach her Shinjutsu," he explained before disappearing again. He didn't enjoy staring into the Sharingan and preferred not to linger around Itachi. Naruko had requested the training after Itachi told her about Jiraiya's powerful use of Shinjutsu. She had made the request about a month earlier, once it became clear there wasn't much more Itachi could teach her besides refining her techniques in Fuinjutsu. It'll probably take her a few months, Itachi thought to himself. With Naruko away, he had time to focus on other matters. It had been over 2 years since he left the area near the hideout. Perhaps now was the right moment to explore what had changed in the villages, and see what his former comrades had been up to. A month and a half later, Naruko returned to the Uchiha hideout in a puff of smoke. She had completed her Shinjutsu training much faster than Fukasaku or Shima had anticipated. Even the great Toad sages were astonished. Jiraiya had trained for a year without mastering Sage Mode, while Naruko had achieved it in under a month. She remained at Mount Mayuboku a little longer to enhance her wind chakra manipulation and sealing techniques. The environment had proven perfect for her training. Naruko walked calmly toward the house. The training had been intense, but she was used to physical strain. What she needed now was a proper rest. Itachi raised a brow as she approached. "That was faster than expected," he remarked. "That's what the toad said too," Naruko responded, her tone relaxed. "I'm going to rest now," she added before heading to her room. Itachi noted how exhausted she seemed. It must have been truly challenging training. 2 days later, Naruko sat under a tree, her body fully rested. She was simply allowing her mind to unwind a bit longer before returning to her rigorous routine. Her thoughts had been working non-stop during her training, and she knew a calm mind was just as important as a strong body. Itachi approached, holding a small storage scroll. Naruko looked up as he arrived. "I have something for you, Naruko," he said quietly. "I picked it up while you were away." Naruko took the scroll and unsealed it with a touch of chakra. In a gentle burst of smoke, a beautifully crafted sword appeared. Lightning danced along its edge. It was the sword of the Flying Thunder God, once wielded by the second Hokage. Naruko held the sword carefully, all lighting up her features. Her smile was the brightest Itachi had ever seen. This meant more to her than any other gift she had received, even more than the headband Iruka had once given her. This was her first true gift, given from the heart. She looked at Itachi and, with genuine warmth, spoke the words that nearly drew a rare smile from the usually stoic Uchiha. "Thank you, Nisan." Dear YouTube family. That's a wrap for this part. Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed the content, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to support the channel and stay updated. Your support means everything. Until next time. Stay strong, stay curious. 6th Path Weeb.